How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this emergency video. It's not going to be too edited. It's a raw reaction to the past insane 24 hours where the Trump administration has finally decided to, engage the Islamic Republic of Iran directly by dropping bombs in specific locations. My name is Pyotr. If you don't know me, I am a graduate of Johns Hopkins SAIS University in strategic studies and economics, and I focus on great power politics, international relations, and, geopolitical risk, having worked in the UN, World Bank, and, in the field as well. Now, if you want to see what the Iranians could do and why they have to react, then watch to the end of the video. But simply what we saw, to quote Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary of the United States, was, I think, a masterstroke of misdirection and broader deception, running with the trends there and the, speculation that was prevalent all over social media, including on X, where I was falling for it. I will fully admit that. Hegseth said that they conducted a precision strike in the middle of the night against 3 nuclear facilities: Natanz, Isfahan, and the rather infamous Fordow, because of how deep its facilities are. He said that the nuclear program was devastated, but emphasized that it was not about targeting troops, and especially, obviously, Iranian civilians. It was very much about infrastructure. They also emphasized very clearly this mission, quote, was not and has not been about regime change. The Trump administration being very clear, their red lines, their willingness to go to, you can argue, a degree of limited warfare. Now, on the details of the Operation Midnight Hammer, bombers set off from the US, with some heading west towards Guam, which is why a lot of people were getting excited about that. But that was, quote, a decoy. And they added that 75, quote, precision-guided missiles were used, including 14, quote, massive ordnance penetrators, or as we know them colloquially, bunker busters. Hegseth also emphasized that no shots were fired at the US during the operation, and they were in Iranian airspace for no more than an hour and a bit. Now, there's a lot that's going to come out of this in the coming days. As I speak, there's going to be more information. I recorded a video yesterday about the Iranian or the Islamic Republic's, sheer fracturing of their grand strategy, what's known as no peace, no war. That is in tatters now, and they really are up against it. The Islamic Republic have very few options really left. Now, one of the biggest notable things, I think, from all of this, though, is the lack of notification, let alone engagement with allies and partners, just warning, particularly European allies and partners, that this was going to happen. Notably, of all the E3, the Germans, the British, and the French, who were on Friday engaging the Iranian foreign minister about a diplomatic solution. All the while, clearly, the Trump administration, the highest circles, have committed to this Operation Midnight Hammer. And I think it's characteristic of the Trump administration to be pretty unilateral in these actions, but equally to be quite dismissive of their European counterparts. And in some ways, this is quite a big shot because of the severity of what this means. It is the single biggest military action, you can argue, the United States has taken since Qasem Soleimani's assassination 5 years ago, and obviously the wars themselves. So I think that's going to be a significant fallout. Whilst publicly, leaders will be saying that this is a good step, it puts Iran, in its place, or reminds them that no state or sponsored state of terror can act like this. Behind closed doors, here in London, in Whitehall, the British will be questioning why, especially considering that they've offered support to the Americans with their base in Cyprus and intervening of missiles from the Iranians, intercepting them with the Americans and being very close. And also because now the British are going to have to send precautionary additional assets to ensure if the Iranians do strike certain assets in the region, that their bases are not at risk. So the Americans have inadvertently heightened the potential risk exposure for the British. Equally, at the same time, we have a United Nations Security Council meeting, which will happen. And from my experience of working directly there with some of the missions, I can tell you that, there's going to be a fair amount of drama. There's going to be, it's going to be a bit like a reality TV program. The British, I think, will largely align with whatever the Americans are saying. The French may well take a slightly different position. We often see the French distancing themselves a little bit on certain issues, or always reflecting that strategic autonomy, independence that, Charles de Gaulle and others have always wanted to emphasize vis-a-vis American interests and operations in the Middle East. And then, of course, we have the Russians and the Chinese. I think it's pretty clear the Russians will use this as an opportunity to emphasize the hypocrisy, double standards of the Americans in the illegality of these actions and the illegality more broadly of Israel. Whether or not you support Israel or not, there is argument about their original operations and sort of whether or not it breaches certain things like the principle of proportionality or principle of escalation, this sort of thing. So that's definitely going to be the narrative that I think the Russians, and to a lesser extent the Chinese, may be saying. The Chinese don't want to escalate, the sort of inflame things too much. Of course, then also there's the domestic element. What implications is this going to have for Trump's supporter base? I can see already a lot of infighting, some MAGAs who support Trump no matter what, Laura Loomer types, but then there are others who are against him because Trump is differing with what he promised. He would be the man to end forever wars. He would not get involved in escalation and external affairs, and here he is doing the exact opposite. Now, this is an aerial campaign. It's not going to be Iraq or Afghanistan. There's no boots going on the ground, but it does mean that the United States is directly engaged with one of the biggest adversaries it has in modern history in a way that it wasn't, well, in the past 6 months. So I'm going to be interested to see what happens. AOC, Democratic Voice, is already calling for Trump's impeachment. So there's obviously going to be a lot of disarray amongst the Democrat Party and others who feel that they weren't involved as well. So the Trump administration largely doing what it wants, and, two fingers up to both allies and partners, but also the Democrats and more moderates, maybe within the Republican Party. Then, of course, there's the Iranians. What are the Iranian people going to think about this? There are a lot of people who are fleeing to Azerbaijan, surrounding nations, for asylum. But does this increase the propensity for them to pressure the Islamic Republic? In my opinion, I'm not so sure. I don't think that there's going to be too much reaction from this because the Islamic Republic was down, but it's not out. And I think the biggest interest that could come out of this, although this is, I think, a bigger picture further away, is what does this do for emboldening separatist movements, small communities in, I don't know, say the Kurds or the Baluchistanis in the southern part of Iran? Do they start to feel that this is their opportunity to increase their right for self-determination, autonomy, break away? Again, not going to pretend I can predict that far into the future, but I certainly think they may try to capitalize on this. And so this obviously leads us to what the Islamic Republic, Ayatollah Khamenei, does. Firstly, the guy is old. He's 86. He doesn't have many options in the sense of, like, he may well feel that he has to double down and go all in because he's at that time of his life. Does he radicalize even more because he is in that phase of life? We see this happening with Putin. Obviously, old age can do that. But equally, the Islamic Republic is not irrational. They're not going to do anything that is completely disproportionate. The main thing that we're seeing develop at the moment is the Security Council, or whatever it's called in the Islamic Republic. One of the arms has greenlit the Iranians to essentially block off or blockade to some degree the Strait of Hormuz, which will affect oil supply, will affect maritime navigation and security down there. But keep in mind that the Islamic Republic is not the US Navy. It doesn't have the capacity to completely control the Strait of Hormuz. It can more disrupt and, just be a nuisance. And, they could do more things. They could strike certain bases along the east of, say, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, in Bahrain. But those would be more risky. But the point is that the Islamic Republic can't not do anything. They have to do something for themselves to demonstrate that they have the willingness to not back down, that they are still strong in the face of unsurmountable pressure, but equally not too much that if they strike US bases and the American personnel are injured or killed, that will require and receive the ire wrath of the United States further. Much like we saw 5 years ago in the death of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranians responded with a couple of strikes on US bases, but no one was killed. So it allowed both sides to claim so-called victory, but the US didn't have to escalate because no one was killed, and the Iranians had responded and shown to be, brave and powerful in the face of foreign adversary of the world's greatest power military. So if the Iranians can play it right, they may well get away with it, but that doesn't mean the end of it. The United States has made it clear that this is as far as they're going to act for now. If they do more, then Trump has made it clear he will react even more devastation for the Islamic Republic. But that doesn't count out Israel. Israel is not finished, And quite clearly, they will probably continue to capitalize on the US intervention at this point. To what extent, it's not clear. Will they try to take out Haneme? Quite possibly, but we'll have to see. And obviously, therefore, when the markets wake up tomorrow, oil prices are going to spike. You can see, I think, a run on some of the markets at some point. We're seeing a dip, at least in the UK, where some of the markets are showing signs already. But equally, not as much as you thought. This is the scenario that so many people have feared for ages, and yet it doesn't seem to have disrupted the market confidence as much as one might have expected. But again, this is Sunday when I'm recording this, and it may well be different tomorrow morning and the rest of the week. But that's a raw reaction from me. If you enjoyed this take, then do subscribe and drop a comment and join us for the videos that I'll be releasing about the fallout from this, Iran's options, more depth, and all the guests that I'll be bringing on, including some former diplomats and ambassadors from the Israeli and Iranian side, UN aspect, to break this down further. But that's it. Take care, everyone, and see you all soon.